You know, Alex, we keep describing it as the worst scandal in the history of the NHS, but I am beginning to reach the conclusion that that doesn't even touch the sides. This is tens and tens of thousands of people infected, dead, their families affected. I mean, it is a scandal beyond all proportions that hasn't actually received some of the attention that it should have. And we know already from the inquiry how many documents were destroyed, how many records went missing. Today, the Hepatitis C Trust held a vigil in Parliament Square, not far from where I am now, all dressed in red. You can get the symbolism. They said to mark the end of the inquiry, described as a time of reflection. Now today also, Grant Shapps, the Defence Secretary, said that he understood why people felt like this, and yes, it had taken too long to get to this moment.
I had a family come to see me a couple of weeks ago in my constituency surgery. I say a family, actually a mother and a father, because they lost their son decades ago now through the infected blood scandal. And it is wrong that it's taken all this time. And when we see the report, which will be published tomorrow, that will be a moment for that family in my Welwyn Hatfield constituency, but also others across the country, to have all of the information and facts which they should have had a very long time ago.
And also doing the political rounds today was the Shadow Health Secretary, Wes Streeting, who said that Labour would address one of the issues that has come up here, which is about whistleblowing.
Well, one of the things that concerns me, both about the contaminated blood scandal, but also about the ongoing silencing of whistleblowers in the NHS, is that we still have a culture of cover-up, a culture that passes the buck, a culture that tries to bury failures under the carpet. And that's why I've been absolutely clear that a Labour government will introduce regulation of senior managers in the NHS, and anyone who is found to be silencing whistleblowers will be fired and will not work in the NHS again.
Yes, culture of cover-up there, Mr. Streeting was saying. I mean, dismal pathology, Hillsborough, bloody Sunday post office even. But as you say, the scale of this is of an altogether different order. What is the government actually going to do beyond spending 10 billion?
Well, we don't know that 10 billion is the exact figure. It's not quite clear where that comes from. But tomorrow the Prime Minister will apologise, we understand, and then on Tuesday we will find out about the compensation package, we have been told. But it comes back to the victims, and I have been speaking to Elizabeth and Jonathan Buggins, who were seriously impacted by the scandal. John Buggins on the left, with his brothers Richard and Edward. They were all diagnosed with severe haemophilia and all treated with factor VIII clotting agent.
When John was between 1 and 2, he acquired HIV. Richard was sort of 3 to 4 when he acquired HIV. Edward, we're not quite sure, the third one, when he acquired hepatitis, or indeed when John acquired hepatitis. That became obvious a bit later on. And then Richard died in 1986, and in the middle of the stigma, really, of HIV.
It's been my entire life. I'm one of the, so they say 380 children who are infected. I don't know how many of us are left. But when you're little, you're growing up and you're developing a sense of who you are. People who suffer trauma during adulthood, they get an opportunity to see the contrast between before and after, don't they? But there wasn't really a before, as far as I'm concerned. It happened when I was about 1 year old, maybe a little bit older, between 1 and 3 anyway. So a lot of it has been trying to understand what's normal, to be honest.
Richard in the left photo was just 8 years old when he died. John still lives with HIV. Both he and Edward were finally treated for hepatitis C, though left with the residual effects. Large amounts of factor VIII were imported from America and made up of plasma donations from high-risk drug users and prisoners.
Our consultant had called a meeting of all the parents with boys with haemophilia to tell us that HIV was a risk. And they knew not enough about it, I think, to give us a full explanation. But he said he thought it was a good idea if we didn't know whether our sons were positive or not, because he was afraid that we would treat them differently. So we sort of took that and went home. And I knew that Richard would have acquired HIV because he had hundreds of thousands of units of American factor VIII, because he used to kill off factor VIII as part of the antibodies that he had. So, and everything that went wrong for Richard. But then a few weeks later, I'd taken the boys up to the haemophilia treatment centre because I had a problem, and noticed a list on the fridge door of children's names. And I recognised that all of the names on that list were big users of factor VIII, so probably in the same sort of category as Richard. But in that list was Jonathan's name. And that's how I found out that Jonathan had also acquired HIV. We were dealing with all of the stigma and fear and pain and just the practicalities of living with 3 boys with these infections early on. And so I just kept coping, as you do, and trying to make life as normal as possible for the children. Didn't think about the emotional impact of it, hardly at all. And it has only been giving evidence to the inquiry, doing that on oath, recognising that I had to tell the truth as it was, as far as I could remember at the time, that made the emotions resurface. And it has had quite a profound impact on me emotionally.
How did the stigma affect you?
Well, I didn't talk to people about it. I think it's really important, actually, because the effect of stigma is that you necessarily end up being isolated. To be honest with you, until before the inquiry started, I was afraid of talking to people about it.
Neither Elizabeth nor John will be at the inquiry tomorrow. They said quite frankly that it will be too much for them. But both are hoping that changes will be made to prevent future scandals, to stop this ever happening again.
Victoria Macdonald there. Well, Nicola Leahy was with other victims and campaigners at the rally in Westminster this afternoon. She had blood transfusions in the 1980s, but didn't find out she'd contracted hepatitis C until 2009. I spoke to her earlier and asked her about what she'd been through.
Yeah, I was infected. I had a blood transfusions in 1975 when I lost a baby, and then I had in 1980 when I had a surgical operation. Unfortunately, that went wrong, and I had loads and loads of blood transfusions, and I was in hospital for 4.5 months. And then that was over and done with. I kept going to doctors and saying I'm tired. He thought because I'd got 3 children under 5, and so nobody took any notice of me. I actually was struck off the list on one GP because he thought I was a hypochondriac. Flu-like symptoms, tiredness, different problems, and finally in 2009 I decided to really go at the GP and say, look, please find out what's wrong with me. I'd taken early retirement because of the tiredness, complete lethargic. I wasn't myself. I wasn't doing the job that I should have. Well, I didn't feel I was doing the job that I should be doing. So I took early retirement out the NHS, and then it came back in 2009 that I'd got hepatitis C. And I started the horrific, and I mean horrific, treatment of interferon and ribavirin. That was 2010. 6 months of hell, and lost a lot of my hair and body hair and eyelashes and all the rest. And then I did my first evidence statement in 2019. Met a lovely crowd of people. That I realised then I wasn't on my own, that there was hundreds, thousands of us out there.
Now, after all that catalogue, what does success look like for you tomorrow after all that?
Tomorrow, I am hoping that we'll have recognition, we'll have an apology, and I mean a proper apology. And then the people who have died, I want them to be recognised. The people that have lost children, I want to be them to be recognised. The people that have lost parents, everybody should be recognised within their own right.
When you say recognise, Nicola, when you say recognise, what do you mean by that?
Accepted onto a lot of the people who have supposedly had a blood transfusion after the cut-off date in 91. They've not been recognised at all yet by the support schemes. I want them recognised so that they will be able to have the compensation when finally we hear about that. And it's not just the money, it's the actual recognise that we are victims and we have suffered. We have suffered a hell of a lot. We come to these hearings and some of us aren't here the next time, and we look around and think, well, who's going to be next? Who's going to be that missing person or people at the next time that we're meeting?
Half a century of this, half a century, roughly speaking, and still we don't even have the full truth. It's an outrage.
And we've seen it during the inquiry and the hearings that I've been to, nearly all of them. We hear of the stories, we hear of the cover-ups, and it makes us more and more determined that we're going to get the truth out there.
And in terms of compensation, I know this is not about the money, it's about things like truth and justice, but the money does matter, let's face it. What does proper compensation look like?
It means security. It means to be able to live our lives. I mean, I'm in my 70s, and we need to be able to just live the rest of our lives and not worrying about, you know, help that we need in the home, help that the family needs, to be able to support us as we get older.
So tomorrow, recognition, as you've put it, the truth, we hope. I'm struggling to see where justice, you say Dying for Justice on your T-shirt there. What is justice, though? It's not quite the same as the truth, is it?
Oh, it's not. It's not. The truth is there in the evidence, but the justice is the fact that people are accountable for what has happened. People are accountable for what we've seen in the evidence of the inquiry, that they did know about it.
And we're still a long way from justice, finally, aren't we?
Yes, still a long way from that.
Thank you so much, Nicola. Thanks very much indeed.
Okay, then. Thank